including as a policy aide to the Associate Director of Science, who at the time was Nobel laureate Carl Wyman. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. After the campaign was over, I came to D.C. and I got an internship working on the inauguration, which was an amazing thing. I helped plan the concert that goes on the day before the inauguration. And then I was offered an unpaid gig working in the White House. And after a few months, that translated into a paid job. And I eventually got to be the confidential assistant in the Office of Science and Technology Policy. And so Carl Wyman won the Nobel Prize for proving the Bose-Einstein condensate correct, which was something that Albert Einstein predicted almost 100 years ago. And so he came to the White House to really focus on improving the science kind of apparatus of the government, but also to focus on STEM education. And so I spent some time working with him on that and really learning how policies made at the White House, how important funding and working with Congress is to doing good science and technology in the federal government. And I really kind of, cut my teeth and learned a ton from my coworkers at OSTP.
And what was it like working with a Nobel Prize winner as a policy aide, and how out of your depth did you feel? One
of the things I'd asked Carl pretty early on was whether, I asked him to go to a lot of the meetings with him. So a lot of the policy aides and assistants don't get to go to the meetings, but because he's a teacher and he cares about educating people, he was fine with that. But what that meant was I would stay late into the night, catching up on all the other work that I should have been doing while I was sitting in those meetings. But, in the long run, those long hours and the hard work really paid off because I learned so much about so many different topics, both including, science and technology policy, but also, how to negotiate in meetings with people in other White House offices. How do you interact with people, with elsewhere in the government, working with states and working with universities and working with companies who everybody comes into the White House. They want something. They want the government to do something, whether it's change a policy or push something with Congress. I mean, they're all there because they want something. And so it's a very complicated thing to figure out how to react and how to respond to those requests. But I mean, I got to work on a number of issues that were my issues. That was a lot of fun. I didn't know very much about most of them before I started. And I really just learned by working with my expert colleagues and, reading everything I possibly could.
That's amazing. That sounds like an incredible experience. So I'm always curious to ask folks who worked in prior presidential administrations, regardless of what party they're affiliated with, how differently do you think the current administration functions compared to the one you served in? What are the biggest differences, and kind of what is the impact of those differences?
Well, I think we were, in the Obama administration, we had very specific policy goals. One of the goals in science and technology was to double science funding and to really push forward on a number of new initiatives, from STEM education to improving health quality to building out, making sure that everyone had access to high-speed broadband internet. I mean, I think you don't see as much of that from the current administration. A lot of the initiatives are about rolling back things that have already happened. And so I think there's not a lot of forward momentum. I mean, I know there's a lot of really good career federal officials that cycle in and out of the White House. I mean, most of the White House staff are career officials from other agencies who get sent on a detail for 6 months or 12 months to the White House. And they're working hard on their portfolios and making sure that the critical work to keeping the government functioning gets done. But I think we had a very clear mandate from President Obama. I mean, he hosted the first White House Science Fair. He had a maker fair where people who were inventing things were able to come and showcase them. I mean, and I think we had a really good atmosphere for pushing new ideas forward and working on things that made people's lives better.
So after the White House, you went to the Department of Energy. Your title there was Associate Director and Chief of Staff of the Office of Energy Policy and Systems Analysis. Can you kind of decode that for us and explain what that position actually was like?
Yeah, so the Department of Energy is an interesting place. Most of the Department of Energy actually deals with nuclear weapons and then the waste from creating nuclear weapons. But there's a smaller piece of the Department of Energy that's really focused on basic research and then applied research in science and energy. And so the Office of Energy Policy and Systems Analysis, when I was there under Secretary Ernest Moniz, was really focused on taking rigorous policy analysis down to building models at the national laboratories and running simulations of what would happen in the energy system if we, say, increase the price of electricity or change the fuel mix of the grid a little bit or added more electric vehicles. And we would run simulations and models about these things to see what would happen. And we would create the policies by using the results of that rather than creating policy by saying, well, we want to do this. And so, we're going to make this policy. We had an analytical background and backing to each of the policies we recommended. And so a lot of the work that we did in EPSA, the Energy Policy and Systems Analysis Office, was really focused on taking the president's priorities, building an analytical framework around that, whether it was the Paris Agreement and the U.S. contribution to the Paris Agreement, whether it was the Clean Power Plan the EPA was putting together at the time, or the Quadrennial Energy Review, which was the first kind of national energy plan that we put together from scratch and then released the first two iterations of during the Obama administration. We had reams and, just thousands of pages of reports and results and data to back up each of the recommendations that we put out for that.
So, Greg, we're going to wind down here. I don't want to take up too much of your time. I know you have a busy schedule, but I did want to ask, so you either are or were a guitar player in a rock band, is that correct?
That is right. I was in a rock band, Tracing Faces. And I play lead guitar and sing some backup. And I still play, actually, but I just don't play with the band right now.
Yeah, it's hard to keep up all the time. So you're a creative person, so I wanted to ask you this question. The Harris School takes a very heavily quantitative approach to solving problems in public policy. In your opinion, as both a creative individual and a policy professional, how much of the policymaking process is art and how much is science? Or more specifically, what are the most important non-quantitative skills required to be an effective policymaker?
Yeah, so I think they're both really important skills to have. And, things like this are always on a continuum of there's people that are, almost 100% quantitative, and there's other people that are, kind of more on the art side of things. And I think when you put a team together, you really need to have a good mix of those people because you need people that can do the numbers and that can, create an analytical background for a certain policy recommendation. But then you also need people who are there to shape it and create a narrative around things and why people should care about this policy proposal or why, if you're a member of Congress, why you should support this specific thing rather than something else. Who does it impact? Who does it help? And so I think, and then there's like the really one-on-one negotiating with whoever it is that you're trying to get to do something. You really have to know the art of how to do that and how to convince people of your position well. And I think that those are all things that you gain through experience. I don't think that any of that comes naturally or is innate to people that can't be learned. And really it's just through practice and observing people who are really good at it.
Great answer. Thank you so much. Greg Gershuny, Executive Director of the Aspen Energy and Environment Program. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And that's a wrap on another episode of UC3P. Credits go to Suo Wu for producing and engineering, Steve Crano for interviewing, and Jordan Mahomey for editing. Our assistant production managers are Arjun Mota, Olu Ogidan, Saumya Karun, and Suo Wu. Our communications director is Thomas Krasnation. Our finance director is Donovan Harvey. Our publisher is Haz Yano. Our intro music is Knockout 2 by The Tubi, and our outro music is Yes Yes Y'all by Matt Large. Our cover art was designed by Shirin Raban. If you want to hear more podcasts, check out our website, uc3p.org. And if you want to contact us, our email is theuc3p@gmail.com. Before we go, I wanted to note that this week's interviewer, Steve Crano, was on loan from one of our sister shows, Chicagoland. If you haven't checked out Chicagoland yet, you really should. They do interviews with people around Chicago who are trying to make this city a better place. I love listening to their interviews, and I think you will too. Check out Chicagoland on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Again, it's just one word, Chicagoland, wherever you listen to podcasts. My name is David Raban, and stay tuned. We'll be back next week with the CEO of Chicago Beyond, Liz Dozier. Why did the chicken cross the road?
Why?
Because damn.
Maybe.
So, I don't think they'll get that though. They'll be like, what?
Yeah, they'll just be like.
I just rolled my eyes so hard.
Yeah.
Arjun, do you like Updog?
I don't know what that is. What is Updog?
You're supposed to say, "What's up, dog?"
Oh.
And I'm supposed to say, "Nothing much, dog. You tell me."
Oh, I'm so sorry.